Hello, this is All 24 News World News Program coming to you live from Algiers. Coming up next in our program. Donald Trump suspected violating the Espionage Act after FBI retrieved 11 sets of documents from his Mar-A-Lago home. Relations between Beijing and Washington, D.C. have deteriorated even more in Taiwan tensions. Colombia's new government and members of the nation's lost guerrilla group took steps toward restarting peace talks. Also coming up, emergency services struggle to contain fires in France's southwest and in several other countries. Hello again, I'm Karim Zachary, your host, and those were today's top stories. First in our topical news, FBI agents suspected former President Trump of potentially violating the Espionage Act and other laws after retrieving 11 sets of documents from his Mar-A-Lago home in Florida, some of them seen as extremely confidential. Islam said with the story.
The U.S. Department of Justice said the FBI agents removed 11 sets of confidential documents from Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, some of them considered above top secret. Trump claimed in a statement that the documents seized by agents were all declassified, and that he would have turned them over if the Justice Department had asked.
You know, a president can declassify anything. Shouldn't be able to declassify the matters of this seriousness. This isn't declassified. It's just improperly handled. This information, as it is coming across, and we'll know more later, is highly classified, well above top secret.
FBI agents took at least 20 boxes and 30 items including information about the president of France. The Washington Post had also reported for possible classified materials related to nuclear weapons, which Trump denied the report, writing on his social media account that the nuclear weapons issue is a hoax.
When it comes to classified information, the moment the president leaves office, he's not necessarily going to be possessing a security clearance, and he doesn't have one right now. There is absolutely no reason for a former president or any other former official to have classified information in their personal possession.
The disclosures made by FBI agents based on a search warrant was approved by federal magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhardt, who believed on the possibility that Trump breached the Espionage Act, a federal law that prohibits the possession or transmission of national defense information, which might threaten national security.
I mean, these are felonies, and these are severe felonies. The Espionage Act is what we prosecute spies under. It's what we prosecute leakers under when they leak sensitive and classified information to the media. This is something that the government takes very seriously.
It's worth mentioning that Trump increased the penalties for violating the Espionage Act when he was a president, making it a felony liable to be punished by more than 5 years in prison.
Secondly, in our topical news, with tensions running high in the Taiwan Strait, relations between Beijing and Washington, D.C. have deteriorated even more. The split in cooperation between the two superpowers have now reached the financial sector, in what is believed to be the fourth U.S.-China crisis since the post-war era. Nabil Khazini with more.
As it was expected, the visit of one of the most powerful people in Washington, D.C., Nancy Pelosi, to Taiwan has reshaped the China-US relations. Ties between the two largest economies in the world have plunged into further uncertainty. A growing financial separation is now becoming more obvious after three state-owned Chinese corporate giants announced plans to remove their shares from the New York Stock Exchange. Changes the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry says will not have an impact on the country's economy.
No matter how the international circumstances might change, China will remain committed to expand high standards opening up. China will not change its determination to share development opportunities with the rest of the world and will not change its commitment to an economic globalization. This is more open, exclusive, and balanced for all.
The declaration of the series of countermeasures started with Beijing staging its largest ever military drills near Taiwan. And despite the Chinese anger over the US open support to Taipei, Washington will boost trade with Taiwan in response to what it calls China's provocative behavior around the island. The new trained plan will be unveiled within days, while the US forces will transit the Taiwan Strait in the next few weeks, making a possible US-China military confrontation even closer than before.
We will not allow China to isolate Taiwan. They have kept Taiwan from participating in the World Health Organization, other things where Taiwan can make a very valued contribution. And they may keep them from going there, but they're not keeping us from going to Taiwan.
This deterioration in the Sino-American ties is merely a result of power rivalry and a plethora of national and world issues, causing relations between the two superpowers to fall from close cooperation to a hostile Cold War.
Russian former President Dmitry Medvedev has issued an indirect threat to Ukraine's Western allies, who have accused Russia of creating the risk of a nuclear catastrophe by stationing forces around the Ukrainian Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council wrote on his Telegram channel saying, quote, "They say it's Russia. That's obviously 100% nonsense, even for the stupid Russophobic public," unquote. Moscow refuses to hand over Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant to Ukraine despite G7 countries' demand. Deputy Speaker of Russia's upper house of parliament said that a complete control over the facility is necessary to ensure the safety of the nuclear power plant. The Democratic-led U.S. House of Representatives approved a $430 billion bill on Friday that is seen as the biggest climate package in U.S. history, delivering a major legislative victory for President Joe Biden ahead of the November 8th midterm elections.
Madam Speaker, this is an American bill. Madam Speaker, this is an American bill. Apple pie, mom, and baseball. Red, white, and blue. This is for the exhausted majority of the people in this country. Democrats, Republicans, independents versus the extremists. If you think that this town's been spending too much money, we need to reduce the deficit, we do that by hundreds of billions of dollars. If you think seniors are taking it on the chin, we help them with prescription drugs and $35 insulin payments.
This is the bill, 728 pages we got from the Senate this week. Has anybody read it? Come on. That's over $1 billion average per page. That ain't gold, that's fool's gold. Look, more IRS agents, as Art Laffer said years ago, that's not going to increase the amount of revenue to the government. And in fact, when you say it's going after the ultra-rich, what happens is the ultra-rich are the only ones that can avoid paying these taxes. They can hire attorneys, accountants, they can move, change their business structure. It comes right back to the middle class every time. These same policies are the reasons that the average black household in the 8 years of Obama lost 30% of their net worth.
One person was killed and at least 17 injured when high winds caused part of a stage to collapse at a dance music festival near the Spanish city of Valencia early on Saturday. The accident happened in the early hours at the Medusa Festival, a huge electronic music festival held over 6 days. Farmers in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico are struggling to keep their animals alive due to severe drought, which is seen as the worst for decades. According to official data, just 10% of Mexico's dams are now full, with many seeing levels drop below half or lower. Western, Central, and Southern Europe have seen over 2 months without any significant rainfall, and it's anticipated that the dry spell will last even longer in what experts believe may be the worst drought in 500 years. Sofian Kinturi has the full story.
An unprecedented drought is worrying nearly half of the European continent. In the coming days, the Rhine River's water levels may drop dangerously low, making cargo transportation more challenging. According to Bastian Klein, an expert at German Federal Institute of Hydrology, levels have dropped roughly to 40 centimeters. Meanwhile, this unprecedented drought pushed UK government to impose water restrictions in parts of England.
In general, there is no ban on navigation at low water. Every skipper is responsible for the loading of his ship and for the safety of the transport. In this respect, there is no suspension of shipping. But of course, for ships in the area of the Middle Rhine that have to go south, it's too shallow for, let's say, normal ships under 40 centimeters.
The Thomas River's source has dried up further downstream than ever before as England appears to be heading into drought. According to British Met's office, this July was driest for England since 1935, especially in some areas of the nation.
So you can see here that the water level is very, very low. And we would expect the water to be much higher at summer. I mean, in winter it goes right up to the top of the bridge pier, but in summer this is quite a low level. So we've had a long period with no rain, and that means that rain is not feeding the river systems, and also the water tables are very, very low as well. So the water can't spring out of the ground to feed the river upstream.
On Friday, smoke rose fire, raging through a protected area in Stadland Heath. There are worries about wildfire caused by the recent warm and dry weather, as well as an effect on transportation and stray water supplies that will leave many villages to struggle with water shortages.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the water runs out. You turn a tap on and there is no water. So it's in that sense, it's quite sort of basic. And that happens for hours at a time until they bring a tanker up and pump more water into the local mains. But clearly that's not a long-term solution.
Italy is also witnessing the worst drought in decades, which has caused the water level of the country's largest lake to fall sharply and reduce in the size. Tourists who visit Simeoni often say the landscape has changed dramatically compared to previous year.
Lake is usually a meter or more than a meter higher. Usually water is up to here. Where there is a small wall, sometimes even tourists get wet from the waves. As far as our business is concerned, we suffer a bit. Boats struggle a little to get out, and tourists might slip on the rocks. But for us it is more difficult to rent sandbeds because they usually are just next to the water, like in a swimming pool.
Europe has seen 45 droughts, which experts classified it as the most frequent natural disaster affecting humans worldwide. The cost for Europe has exceeded $27 billion, with 40% of continental land and 70% of population affected.
Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised firefighters across the continent as emergency services struggle to contain fires in France's southwest and in several other countries. Hassan Burkan.
Firefighters from across Europe come to France rescue on Friday to battle a massive wildfire that scorched thousands of hectares and displaced 10,000 people. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has praised the solidarity of heroic firefighters across the continent, affirming that European solidarity appears more necessary than ever in a continent plagued by drought and heat waves. The European Commission announced on Thursday that 4 planes from the European Union firefighting fleet have been sent to France from European Union countries to support French firefighters under the EU Civil Protection Mechanism.
The European Commission has dispatched 4 airplanes from its rescue firefighting fleet positions in Greece and Sweden. In addition, firefighting teams from Germany, Poland, Austria and Romania are on their way to support French first responders via the mechanism. The EU continues to monitor the situation across Europe and stands ready to help the affected countries.
Firefighters from Germany, Romania, Greece and beyond were on the ground to help France battle the fire in the region, as well as on other fronts, including in Brittany in the northwest.
For us, it's a natural thing to provide our assistance to our French colleagues, and we work close, shoulder on shoulder with other EU teams, like teams from Poland, from Romania, the Austrian team, and from my point of view, that's European solidarity at its best. That's how the Union Civil Protection Mechanism works.
We work very easy with us because we have the language which is common, and we communicate very easy with all the crew from every country.
Wildfires have broken out across Europe this summer as successive heat waves bake the continent and renew the focus on climate change risks to industry and livelihoods. With human-caused climate change triggering droughts, the number of extreme wildfires is expected to increase 30% within the next 28 years, according to a February 2022 UN report.
Prior to the rainy season, aid is desperately needed in South Sudan for the most vulnerable among the 835,000 residents affected by flooding in the world's youngest country. The UN Refugee Agency issues a warning that South Sudan's ongoing flooding and displacement problems are likely to get worse once the wet season starts in May. To shield already vulnerable communities from its worst effects, immediate action is required. The Algerian Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad Ministry said in a statement that Algiers strongly condemns the terrorist attacks on the Malian Armed Forces units, which left many casualties among the Malian soldiers. The statement said, quote, Algeria expresses solidarity with the Malian people and government and reiterates its strong support in their fight against terrorism. In his speech during the celebration of the International Youth Constitutional Day, the head of the Libyan National Unity Government, Abdelhamid Dbeiba, called on the House of Representatives and the state to stop what he called absurdity and to approve the constitutional rule that prevents holding elections to resolve the political crisis in the country, accusing the House of Representatives and the state of trying to extend themselves and repeat the transitional stages. Sierra Leone's president said on Friday that his week's anti-government protests, which led to the deaths of 6 people officers and at least 21 civilians, were an attempt to overthrow the government. On Wednesday, police officers used tear gas and in some cases guns to disperse large crowds of protesters, throwing rocks and burning tires in the capital, Freetown, and several towns in the opposition's northern heartland. It has been 1 year since the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and the country has witnessed a lot of changes apart from a dwindling economy. The health and infrastructure of the country is in shambles. Mariam Ziad.
A year after the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan, humanitarian needs are rising more than ever, leaving most Afghans unable to provide basic needs for their families. The US, the UK, and other world powers placed Afghanistan under strict sanctions, as they don't recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government. Sanctions which froze some $9 billion in assets and aid efforts are causing the country to spiral into a financial crisis, affecting tens of millions of Afghans. Suffering of Afghans includes hunger driven by increase in food prices, high unemployment, and export restrictions on key products like wheat and sunflower oil.
Before it was better. Since the Islamic Emirate ruled, we can't even find bread. I can't give milk to my children. We have nothing. We haven't had anything to eat for 3 or 4 days. Before it was better. We could find things to eat. Now there is nothing.
Hospitals have also been heavily impacted by the sanctions, with thousands of healthcare workers across the country going without wages for months at a time.
We have a lot of patients, the patient that come in critical time, the patient come arriving in the hospital. When we ask from the caretaker, when your patient become like this, say that 3 days ago, we asked why you on the time you didn't come to hospital, yeah? They said because we didn't have any money to reach ourselves to the hospital.
Women and girls' rights remain threatened, and efforts to erase them from everyday life have only increased after the militant group took over the country. Thousands of secondary school girls were ordered to stay home, reversing years of progress for gender equality. And for children, life is dire as they're going to bed hungry every night and are suffering from acute malnutrition and several diseases. Afghanistan, which has been making the news more than any country in the last decade, is now facing one of the world's biggest humanitarian crises.
And in a different file, a massive shooting left 12 people dead, including the shooter, in Montenegro on Friday. 6 other individuals were also injured, including a policeman. According to local media sources, the shooting occurred in Saint-Denis when the 34-year-old man opened fire on people in his neighborhood due to a family dispute. A riot and shootout caused by prison confrontation between two members of two rival gangs, Los Chapos and Los Mexicales, in Mexico, left at least 11 people dead, most of them civilians. According to local media, gunmen arrived to a little pizza shop and started shooting at the people inside the building and in the parking lot. 4 employees of a radio station were killed. Meanwhile, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said he hoped this sort of incident involving innocent civilians would not happen again.
It is something that had not happened before, and we hope it doesn't happen again, because innocent people were attacked in retaliation. It was not only a clash between two groups, they started to shoot at civilians, innocent people.
Still in Latin America, Colombia's new government and members of the nation's last guerrilla group took steps Friday toward restarting peace talks that were suspended 3 years ago in Cuba. Marwa Belaguer has the details.
After his inauguration, Colombia's first leftist president, Gustavo Petro, said he wants to start peace talks with the nation's remaining armed groups in effort to reduce violence in rural areas.
We will examine whether or not society will have at a given moment the opportunity to discuss in full the options we have to definitely end war in Colombia.
After a meeting between representatives of both sides in Havana, Colombia's National Peace Commissioner Danilo Ruda declared the government would take the necessary judicial and political steps. Those steps will likely include lifting an arrest warrant for the National Liberation Army negotiators currently living in exile in Cuba. The administration of newly inaugurated president will engage with the ELN delegation and considers them to be legitimate representatives of the rebel group.
We believe that the ELN has the same desire for peace as Colombian government and hope that they are listening to the many voices in different territories who are seeking a peaceful solution to this armed conflict.
Peace talks between Colombia's previous government and the ELN were terminated in 2019 after the rebels set off a car bomb at a police academy in Bogota and killed more than 20 cadets.
We have to achieve peace in Colombia. The people in Bolivar Square shouted that at the inauguration of President Gustavo Petro in Colombia on August 7th, and the government has full confidence in such mandate. Of course we do too. Each of us received that mandate from the Colombian people. We must seek peace.
Following that incident, Colombian authorities issued arrest warrants for ELN leaders in Cuba for the peace negotiations, but Cuba refused to extradite them, arguing that would compromise its status as a neutral nation in the conflict. The ELN, which was founded in the 1960s, has long been designated by the U.S. State Department as a foreign terrorist organization.
In Colombia still, Colombian President Gustavo Petro selected on Friday new commanders for the military and the police, saying he chose them because they have not been accused of corruption or human rights violations. During a news conference, Petro has promised profound changes to security forces and urged the new officials to protect life and citizens.
La Fuerza Pública de Colombia.
The new commanders that will lead Colombia's public forces are aligned with the human security politics goals we promised, and that we want to turn it into a reality, and evaluate in due time to know about its effectiveness to guarantee peace, to guarantee decrease in violence and crime, to guarantee substantial respect towards human rights and citizens' freedoms, as every democracy should.
Garantizar la disminución de la violencia.
The benchmark rate for the 28-day period was increased by Argentina's central bank from 60% to 69.5%, a figure the bank had established only 2 weeks prior. At the same time, the government reorganized its cabinet to make room for new Minister of the Economy. The nation struggles to control inflation, which has reached a 20-year high of 71%. Moving on now to a different matter, the Italian journalist Piero Angela, known as the friend of the Algerian Revolution, died today at the age of 93. The news was announced on Facebook by his son Alberto, also a well-known face on Italian television. Hossein Burkan.
Have a good trip, Dad. This was the post of Piero Angela's son on Facebook, a message of farewell of his dad. Piero Angela died at the age of 93, but he was active until the end of his journey. Piero Angela, a refined intellectual, journalist, and a writer who has shaped the history of television in Italy in an unforgettable way. Piero Angela, the friend of the Algerian Revolution and the correspondent of the Right Government channel at the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 60s from Paris. His works documented the Algerian Revolution, especially the demonstrations of October 17, 1961 in the French capital. Piero Angela was honored by the presidency of the Algerian Republic last November for what he gave to the Liberation Revolution and awarded him the National Order of Merits and the title of the Friend of the Algerian Revolution. His last words were priceless, a lesson to the future generation.
Dear friends, I'm sorry not to be with you anymore after 70 years together. But nature also has its own rhythm. They have been very stimulating years for me that have led me to learn about the world and human nature. Above all, I was lucky enough to meet people who helped me achieve what every man would like to discover. Dear all, I think I have done my part. Try to make yours too, for this difficult country of ours. A big hug. Piero Angela.
Through his journey, Angela wrote 33 books, which sold over 3 million copies, received many honorary degrees, made over 60 documentaries and hundreds of television episodes, won 7 Telegatos and 8 times on the National Television Directing Award. Piero Angela left us today, but he will always be remembered as the friend of Algeria.
May he rest in peace. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the end of our program. For more updates, follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.